over the world, there are cultural differences between one country and another. And indeed, within each country, there are cultural differences between one area and another. And I'm going to talk about one or two cultural differences that we've encountered when ministering to people in Africa. One challenge that we often face is the belief that talking about negative things only actually makes them worse, and indeed brings a curse. So it may be quite difficult to encourage people to talk about the appalling things which have very often happened to them. Another belief in some areas is that people who suffer from depression and any kind of mental illness are under some kind of curse, and indeed it's true that they might have been cursed, but they are often shunned by the other members of the village. Another challenge that we find is that very often people will tell you what they think you want to hear rather than the truth. And this can call for great discernment. You may be slightly thrown when you find that some people find it very difficult to make eye contact with you. Now, this may be because of a belief in some countries that it's actually quite rude to look people in the eye. So people that you pray with, who are talking to you, may look away, look down at the floor. And if you're not aware that this is a cultural difference, you may think at best that they're being rude, or at worst that it's a sign of deep emotional trauma. And of course it may be, as well as a cultural difference, it may be a sign of that trauma. Speaking more generally, one of the biggest differences is that in the West, basically speaking, we are encouraged to develop as individuals, and the fulfillment of the individual on a secular viewpoint is seen as being most important. In many other countries, including Africa, the individual is seen as part of the group, and it is the group, whether that is the family or the tribe or the village, which is most important. So children are taught from a very, very early age that being part of a group is the most important thing. Often this will mean that they accept that the leaders of their group are extremely wealthy, and nothing wrong is seen in this, even though there are many people living in poverty. This may also have something to do with the concept of mass trauma. It's been discovered that people living in war zones can be really badly traumatized, even if they haven't directly been involved in traumatic incidents. And so again, we need to take account of this when going into areas where we are dealing with traumatized people. The influence of slavery is often found in one form or another. Many leaders in Africa have told us that because of covenants made in previous years with the powers of darkness, then those areas have come under a sort of yoke of slavery. And of course this has been made worse by the European slave trade on the west coast of Africa and the Arab slave trade on the east coast of Africa. Moving inland, there are countries such as Uganda, where for many years there was a custom of kidnapping people from nearby villages and using them as slaves, or maybe selling them on to be used by others as slaves. And before we rush to condemn, I think it's worth remembering that many people estimate that today, in many countries of the world, including Western countries, there is more slavery than there ever has been at any time in the history of the world. We can, of course, ask Jesus to lift this yoke of slavery, but we do need to remember the importance, again, of the group, and maybe adapt our methods of counselling or prayer ministry so that we're taking into account not just the needs of the individual, but the needs of the group that he or she comes from.